Okay, we are live. Hi, Sheetal. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Welcome to another IBA Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. On that note, for those of my Canadian friends that are on the call today, it's a couple of hours before the long weekend starts, the day where we celebrate that we're not American. But shortly after that, Sheetal, you have July 4th. In case you don't have it marked in your calendar, you have Thursday off. You don't,
Yeah. Thank you.
right?
Thank you for the reminder. I
You're
need it.
welcome. You're welcome. So today, Sheetal, we're going to talk about a couple things. We've got two topics that we want to cover with everybody today. The first one being another breach, right? It seems like every month there's something. With this one was with Snowflake, which is pretty significant. And then we're going to jump in and talk about some of our friends that are somewhat ignored in the security space, right? The Linux users.
Absolutely.
We're going to chat about them. So why don't we jump in and talk about Snowflake? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Rob, you tell us. Every month there's one of these big breaches. So tell us a
Yep.
little bit about what Snowflake does.
Absolutely. So listen, before we get started, we should probably say this is not a slag against Snowflake. These mistakes continue to happen. It doesn't matter the organization. Everybody other than one Cosmos is secure. But in all seriousness, no, this is not to poke fun at Snowflake or anything like that. We're just looking at, kind of dissecting what happened and then, how can we learn from and improve upon in the future so it doesn't happen to others, right? But listen, Snowflake. I think most people know who Snowflake is, but in case you don't or it's new to you, they're a large data storage and analysis firm that provides a platform for companies to drive intelligence and insights from the data that they're collecting on their customers.
Customers. Yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's where this gets a little bit tricky, right? Because there's
Mhm.
so much data, customer data.
Mhm.
That stuff becomes super important, super valuable to the bad guys, right?
Mhm. And which is what we like to call it that honeypot, right? Some critical, beautiful data in there, which is
Yeah.
great for all these hackers. So tell us a little bit about the hacker organization, how the actual compromise happened.
Yeah. So, listen, the hacker guys have cool names, Scattered Spider and, some other
Shiny.
ones. This one was Shiny Hunters. Okay.
Mhm.
It's kind of a cool name.
Mhm.
But basically, this happened by exploiting a weakness in the customer account security rather than kind of a direct kind of vulnerability that was found within the platform.
Mhm.
So once they kind of got the access, it's been reported that they found, unencrypted usernames and passwords that the worker used to access an EPAM customer Snowflake account, including an account for Ticketmaster. I think it was
Santander Bank.
Ticketmaster, and there's another one, right? Yeah,
Santander Bank.
Santander, right? Yeah, exactly. So the hacker says that the credentials were stored on the worker's machine in a product management tool called Jira. I think you're familiar with Jira,
Mhm.
Sheetal. I think you use that all the time.
Mhm.
But the hackers are able to use those credentials, they say, to access Snowflake accounts because the Snowflake accounts, guess what, Sheetal?
Mhm.
Didn't require MFA,
MFA, yes.
right?
So actually what happened was they found this file with unencrypted usernames, passwords. Then they went ahead, logged in. None of these accounts had any MFA on them, which means that was easy peasy for them to get in and have access to a volume of data. Tell us a little bit about the data that they actually had access to, Robert. What
Yeah,
kind of data really got compromised?
yeah. So listen, I mean, I think we're probably all Ticketmaster customers, right? I think we all know what Ticketmaster kind of asks for, right? But the stolen data included bank account details for over 30 million customers, including 6 million account numbers and balances, 28 million credit card numbers, and human resource information about staff. And that's all according to a post published by the hackers themselves. Lending Tree and Advanced Auto Parts outside of Santander have also said they might be victims as
Mhm.
well. So lots of data.
Yeah, lots of great data. But I think what do we learn from these kind of hacks, Robert? Like, what's the takeaway from here?
I mean, listen, we've been in the security space for a long time, right?
Mhm.
And we all know that username and passwords are not the way to go. And that's, here at One Cosmos, we're trying to get rid of all that stuff.
Mhm.
But at a minimum, we need to turn on MFA, right? So we need to make sure that to add another step to try to verify the identity of the person that's trying to authenticate. So while MFA doesn't verify identity in the One Cosmos sense necessarily, it does provide another roadblock to prevent a hacker from gaining access to something. So at a bare minimum, I think at this point, this is another warning shot that if you don't have MFA turned on, go turn it on. Because at the end of the day, that's going to make your stuff just that much harder to get into, or they'll go find somebody else that doesn't have MFA turned on. But what did we learn? MFA, turn on MFA, right?
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
What about you? Did you get any takeaways from that?
So I think the initial compromise happened through a third party contracting firm, right?
Yes.
So this kind of basically means that, your MFA and your security procedures probably need to go 2 levels deep. It's not just about making sure that your own organization and enterprise has MFA enabled. It's your enterprise, your third party contracting company's enterprise. And finally, it's about the customer. Make sure that the customer also has MFA terms so they are notified
Yeah.
when there is an unauthorized access to their account, right? So that was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, third-party contractors. I mean, how many times have we heard about it? I think almost every other breach is because of a third-party contractor, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
issue from a security team is that you can't control what that third party is doing. So you need to put things into place to make sure that they're at least following some sort of consistent security measure to help protect your own
Mhm.
data, right? So yeah, anyway, on that note, Sheetal, we said we
Let's
were going to talk to some of our friends that
get ignored.
don't typically get a lot of love.
Mhm.
Here at One Cosmos, we support a lot of different platforms. We do Windows, Mac, we do Android, we do iOS, we do Radius, we do Fido. There's all kinds of different standards and flavors that we support. Linux is also one of those. Now, Linux is not widely used. So why don't you tell me a little bit about, Linux and, how we or what we're doing there?
Mhm. So Linux typically usually has like a very small user base. If you look at any large enterprise, you know that they have multiple Linux servers deployed across their enterprise.
Yeah.
And usually it's a small user base and it's heavily ignored, but you know that these small user base has access to some critical infrastructure. So
Yep.
we're looking at databases that manage some very, very critical data, like customer data or like trading data if you're a financial organization, right? So this is the kind of data that's sitting behind any kind of Linux server. They usually even have like different kind of cron jobs or like administrative tasks that are
Mhm.
running behind the scenes. And this is typically what a setup for Linux really looks like. In every customer that we've met who's a large enterprise, they've always required Linux to be part of the package, right? How can we protect our Linux infrastructure with MFA? And
Yeah.
seamless MFA, right? Different kinds of MFA.
Yeah. So those users, like you said, are typically looking after, critical data, right? We
Mhm,
just talked about the importance of managing critical data in the breach.
mhm.
So what are we delivering to Linux users to try to help secure that environment now?
So I think some of the things is, hey, like you have a lot of root users who are running, who have access to these critical servers. So you want to make sure that, when they're performing some task, and usually it's like an administrative task where they're either modifying a script or they're accessing this data, you have MFA in there, right? So our offering really, Linux is, it's a basic setup that you're looking at. And even inside that setup, we are able to enable these users to require MFA, and MFA through just an email OTP, SMS OTP, or through push, which means there is a device that's connected, which is receiving the notification, and the user is able to sort of gain access, right? The other thing that we've seen is, and this is a real world use case where we were working with one of our case studies, where we saw a whole bunch of power users or research users who had Linux desktops, right? So these are really power users. How do you give MFA to this kind of setup? So that's another use case where we were able to step in and empower these users to ensure that they have MFA in place. So we want to make sure that, any kind of remote access through SSH, any kind of database operations that are happening within a Linux server containing critical data, or anyone who's performing a highly administrative task has MFA enabled. And I think finally, what we want to stress on is service accounts, right? In most of these customer sites, what we've seen is there are services that are running behind the scenes that have no human intervention, right? And these are typically, they're very hard to get into, but there's always a user who's sitting behind the scenes, managing that entire cron job, as we like to refer to it. A good example of it would be, a financial institution who's sort of trying to reconcile all the trades that happened during on a particular day. So that's like a good example of a cron job that's running. So that service itself is running there, but there is a administrator who's sitting behind the scenes, sort of managing the entire operation. That user needs to have MFA, but your service account does not need to have MFA because, so that's another use case that OneCosmos can kind of enable. We can sort of set it up to say that, hey, you know what? Your service accounts don't need MFA because they're completely hardened. They're in a different location. Only certain accounts can access it. But the users, the real identities behind them, require MFA. So it's sort of a beautiful flavor of MFA plus making sure it's adaptive. So we're able to bring the entirety of having Linux inside your enterprise, right? So that's what OneCosmos has to offer.
That's cool stuff. So, obviously I'm going to ask, can you show this to us? Do you have anything that you can see?
Absolutely.
So, there's kind of, two flavors of the Linux, like you said. So, it's awesome that we're delivering something that these users can use and excuse me, and enterprises can implement, because like you said, a lot of the data that sits on a Linux server is typically, pretty business critical stuff, right? So, you have a video, yeah?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get my screen sharing together. Share screen. Okay, so you able to see my screen, Robert?
Yes.
This video is extremely glamorous, Robert, and I'm being sarcastic about it.
Well, I mean, it is Linux. There's, sometimes some parts there is kind of the Linux that looks like a Mac or a Windows OS, but then there's like Linux, which is all code line, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the basic GUI interface. So what you can see here is a customer who's trying to authenticate. They've provided their localhost username here. What we're doing is behind the scenes, we're validating the user's password. We can do both password-based MFA plus passwordless, right?
Okay.
So typically in the first step, you're either validating that the user's password, and then what the OneCosmos PAM or the authentication module does is it gives you different options, and you can see 5 different options here. They're pretty configurable, meaning if you want to be a very tight-knit organization and say, I only want to enforce passwordless for all my Linux users, we're able to support that.
Okay.
Right. So you come in, you're selecting an option. Which one of these options do you want? This one particularly, I think we've always been advocates of passwordless. So we're only going to look at what the experience looked like if you had to do a passwordless experience.
Okay.
Right. So you'd see that the user is selecting number 2, send push. And once they do send push, this particular user gets a push notification to the right on their mobile app. And once you do, what they're doing here on the mobile app is, one, they are proving possession of the device itself at the time of onboarding. Second, they're also providing biometrics. So it's like it's a really secure form,
Yeah,
right? Because it's something that you have and something that you know.
yeah,
So you're basically doing both of it, and then the user is given access. So this is what our implementation of Linux looks like. It's fairly easy for us to retrain these users to say, hey, you know what, we're incorporating MFA into the process. Go ahead, give it a try. This is what we're protecting. And for an organization itself, any access entry point is a security threat. So we're able to sort of give you that 100% coverage for your across your enterprise, across all your systems. So that's really the big benefit here.
that's cool. I mean, from a user experience standpoint, that's pretty easy, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and it's something that users do. I mean, how many times do you pick up and look at your phone, Sheetal? I mean, you're
Mhm.
always, so so I mean, you're not asking somebody to do something, that they don't typically do anyway. And you've just infinitely improved the security that's sitting in front of your Linux desktops, which is pretty cool.
Mhm. Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely.
All right. That's it
Okay.
for another IBA Friday, Sheetal.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks
Okay.
again. Oh, where's your vest?
I think you're
Yeah.
doing something right.
The reason why that's a bit of a joke, everybody, we went to Identiverse, and every time I saw Sheetal, I'm like, Sheetal, where's your vest? She's like, I have it.
Um,
Anyway, listen, thanks again for coming along and listening to our IBA Friday. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Sheetal, I'm going to enjoy my long weekend, and I hope you enjoy your long weekend next weekend.
okay, sounds
See you
good.
later,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.